Hello everybody, Disciple here with Overwatch Curios. Do you ever get the feeling that while you're doing okay as a player, you seem to be missing out on some of the more obscure mechanics that you could be doing to give yourself an edge over the enemy? Well, pros and top 500 players at the highest level of play not only have incredible aim and positioning, but they also understand the metagame behind Overwatch as well, and all of the little moves they need to be making throughout each match. There's plenty of tricks that they take advantage of in-game, so let's take a look at some of these tricks that pro players abuse that you too can use in your own games. Now, Overwatch can be a battle of information, so knowing the enemy's position can be a huge advantage. With snipers being popular picks in the meta right now, rounding corners blindly can lead to you dying instantly, forcing your team into a disadvantage before a fight even starts. Pro players abuse the ability to peek corners safely from a third-person view. You can do this simply by standing at the edge of a wall you want to peek and using an emote to pull out your character from first person into third person. This is incredibly beneficial because it can allow you to see where the enemy team is going or where they're set up at, but it doesn't let the enemy team know that you've seen them. Third-person peeking can also allow players to plan their attack routes accordingly, resulting in fewer attempts to win control of a point or objective. Planning ultimates has always been incredibly important, and something that pros and grandmasters abuse to give themselves the upper hand in these fights. Being able to now see your friendly team's ultimate charge on tab allows you to plan ultimates a lot more efficiently and call shots for your team. While pressing tab isn't necessarily a trick, you'd be surprised at just how many people don't take advantage of their ability to look at their team's ult charge. Say for example, a Reinhardt sees an opportunity for a good Earthshatter and takes it, knocking down 3 or 4 people, but only 2 are able to be killed during the time of the stun. If Reinhardt used that Earthshatter when a friendly DPS like Pharah or Reaper was at 90% ultimate charge, they might have missed a huge opportunity to wipe the ultimate team, as opposed to checking and seeing that they were at 30 or 40%. Now, knowing when you're going to have lethal combos like a Graviton or Dragon Strike lined up also lets you decide where to take the fight. The distance an enemy team is away from the point or objective determines how much time you'll be able to take from them after successful combos. For example, a team wipe just outside of the enemy's spawn may only buy you 10 or 15 seconds, but allowing them to play aggressively into you and baiting out a dive can strip away upwards of 30 seconds because of how long it'll take them to return to the objective from their spawn point. Pros will often play not only when, but where they want to use such ultimate combos to try and extend all of the time leading up to the fight that the enemy team is essentially wasting, since it won't result in any sort of success. Now, knowing when you can sync up ultimates with your allies or where you want to use them is only part of the battle when it comes to taking advantage of your ultimates properly. Pro players will constantly be looking for ways to recycle ults, which is basically just an effective way of farming more and more ults faster than the enemy team. Probably the most common example of this is with Lucio. As Lucio, when you drop the beat, you provide a huge amount of overheal to your team that fades over the next few seconds, and everyone's pretty aware of that. Since this overheal doesn't actually apply to any health that the affected targets may have already been missing though, top level Lucio players will save their Amp It Up to use when sound barrier fades off. If you're able to distribute a lot of healing with Amp It Up at the end of your sound barrier, not only will you extend your team's advantage, but you can potentially receive a huge boost of ult charge towards your next sound barrier, and this is what recycling ultimates is all about. And of course, the reason that you're getting so much ult charge from your Amp It Up is because your team is already grouped together for your ultimate and you're fighting together as a unit, as opposed to another situation where you may only have 2 or 3 teammates nearby. Now, Lucio isn't the only hero that's able to recycle ults quickly for a team though, so we'll briefly discuss many of the other ways that you can add to this trick into your own skill set with plenty of the game's heroes. Ana's Nano Boost is most commonly used to charge up another ultimate like Genji's Dragon Blade or Soldier 76's Tac Visor, but investing 2 ultimates into a single target can actually be really detrimental when there's so much crowd control in Overwatch lately. Thanks, Brigitte. Now, pro players are increasingly more often using Nano Boost on a key DPS to let them farm ultimate charge more quickly than instead putting all of their efforts into boosting one single ability. So if Ana saves her Nano Boost until after Genji's Dragon Blade is complete, the increased defense will allow him to stay alive much longer, and being able to deal more damage just means his progress to the next Dragon Blade goes a lot faster. In an extended teamfight, it could mean you have back-to-back Dragon Blades with a little bit of finagling in between. Now, in fact, you can even use ultimates as a way of recycling other ults for your own team. For example, using Graviton Surge with the Reinhardt in play means that with him dealing massive area of effect damage, the Reinhardt will not only be able to kill multiple people on the enemy team, but he'll also be able to charge his Earthshatter absolutely breathtakingly fast. By recycling important tank ultimates like this, you can have huge crowd control for multiple fights in a row, allowing your team to snowball progress on payload maps or control points. Mercy and Orisa can both use their ultimates to amplify the damage of the entire team, which can be really effective in recycling ultimates for everybody. If used when the rest of your team is low on ultimate charge, you can give everyone a huge boost towards their next ultimate just by using yours. Trading one ultimate in exchange for charge on 5 others can be a huge momentum play for your team, and also happens to tie back into our discussion on using tab to keep track of your team's ultimate economy. And as a supportive player like an Orisa or Mercy has to be, doing this constantly is going to help a lot. Using that damage boost on someone who's already ulting may not actually be the difference between them getting the kill or not, but using them in between ults could mean more ults for your team, meaning more won fights. But there's one more underutilized and valuable trick when it comes to the ultimate game that pros abuse over and over again to gain an edge over their enemies. Ults can be used to zone enemy teams completely, giving your team a huge advantage in a fight. When you see certain ults like High Noon, Maze Blizzard, Diva's Self-Destruct, or of course Wrecking Ball in his mines, you can create an area of space where enemies simply cannot enter unless they are completely willing to die. Mei in particular is an underrated hero, and with the more tanks there are in play, the more viable she becomes because of her extremely strong crowd control on slow-moving targets. Using ultimates to deny an area or zone on the map can allow your team to make the final push for capturing an objective. Or it can even help you find the last few meters on an escort map, which, due to the defender spawn, can be some of the most difficult captures to secure in the entire game. Outside of that, using ultimates to zone is also just useful for regaining momentum for your team. Zoning can break open chokes for your team and allow them to press through, and in the confusion of the enemy team scattering and retreating, you'll be able to secure a stable space for your team and find kills off the back of the panic, which can sometimes be just enough to secure your team a capture or a wipe on the entire enemy team. Another trick pro players often abuse is taking advantage of map terrain instead of favoring to defend a point directly where it is. At the highest level of play, you'll often see defending teams not even standing on the objective or capture point, simply so they can take to higher ground and gain a strong advantage over the attacking team. At lower levels of play, teams will often stand directly on a payload, which can open them up to flanks and attack routes from behind, which they may not be prepared for. Of course, at the base level of thinking, it makes sense that you have to stand on the objective to make sure the enemy team can't touch it. But what's even more important is putting yourself in a position to win the fight, since the enemy team can't capture the objective if they're dead, and likewise, you can't defend it if you're dead. Understanding the value of high ground in Overwatch and sharing it with your team means if the enemy team has done something like set up directly on a payload, you can take an indirect path towards the payload if it means you're going to have the high ground and press your advantage into them. Inversely, understanding where to set up your team on defense can have the same result. Since capture progress on points is dependent on ticks, you can use the early seconds of a team fight to secure a kill from the high ground, and then drop onto a point before the enemy team gets their first tick, while your team will still have a health and player count advantage. One of the most common uses of this tactic in pro play is the first point of Volskaya, where defending teams will frequently stand on the upper back platforms overlooking the point, and then crash onto the objective when the attacking team makes their way onto the point, but only after they've exploited the advantage of high ground and secured a pick to give them a numbers advantage in the fight. And that's why attacking teams likely need to go around the right or left flanks to even try and take a fight up there, because if they go straight onto the objective, they're going to have a bad time. One of the most important things you can do as a player is to understand map layouts and build your team's advantage around possession and control of space, and not necessarily maintaining physical, direct control of the objective, since the enemy team is really your only enemy. Alright everybody, that about does it for our tricks that pro players abuse that you can do too in your own games. We just got back from a very exciting trip to New York City watching the Overwatch League finals, where I had such a fantastic time, and I'd love to thank Blizzard for sending me out there to spend a couple days in New York with some of Overwatch's biggest fans, and if you guys were there, then maybe you saw me. If any of you guys were there, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you guys just watched it at home, I hope you liked it too. But I plan to make a lot more content about the pro scene in the future, since it's so incredibly fascinating, and Blizzard is taking it to some incredibly awesome places. Now today we spent a lot of time discussing the ultimate economy and management of the pros, but which of these tricks was the most helpful to you? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. And while we're here, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos in the future where you can hear my voice talking about Overwatch and all sorts of fun, nerdy things about it. Anyway, until next time,